welcome to our final panel. Thank you so much for being here. And again, welcome into the space of openness and curiosity. And this is a panel called Reclamation, Empowerment, and Repair. And so I'll introduce the poets, and I'm one of them. So I'm Rob Arnold, and you're probably tired of seeing me. I'm the executive director here of Poets House, and I was one of the curators of this symposium. My book, To the Unnamed, is forthcoming from Grey Wolf Press in 2027. Oh, thank you. Yes, I require lots of applause. I'm joined by Lou Cornum, a diasporic writer, editor, and academic born in Arizona and based in New York City. Their work traverses Native American studies, science fiction, cultural studies, and gay communism. My favorite kind of communism. And they're currently an assistant professor in the Department of Social and Cultural Analysis at NYU, as well as part of Pinko magazine. And Dr. Tacey Atsitty, Dinez, goodness, I forgot to ask you.
You can say the English, it's fine.
Okay, the Sleep Rock people and born for the Tangle people. Atsitty is a recipient of the Wisconsin Brigham Prize for Poetry and other prizes. She holds a bachelor's from Brigham Young University and the Institute of American Indian Arts and an MFA from Cornell University. Her work has appeared basically everywhere, but Poetry, Epic, Kenyon Review, Prairie Schooner, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, the Norton Anthology of Native Nations Poetry, Leavings, and other publications. Her first book, Rain Scald, is Rain Scald from the University of New Mexico Press, and her second book is At Risk from Wisconsin. And she's a member of the Advisory Council for BYU's Charles Redd Center for Western Studies and a board member for Light Scatter Press. I'll just read the last part too, because you are a PhD in creative writing from Florida State and is assistant professor of creative writing at Beloit College in Wisconsin, where she lives with Aspen. So give it up for our panelists today. So I will be speaking and moderating. So again, we the assignment was to come with something to talk about. And Tacey, you have something to share. So
yeah. I have something to share. Yeah. So I'll start us off. I was thinking about empowerment, especially with the Diné poet Orlando White. And okay, Mike. There you go. All right. So once our little slide gets up here, thinking about structural, empowerment through structural world building in Orlando White's poetry. And then next slide. Right. So this is the book that I'll be talking about. He has 3 books, but I'll be looking at Bone Light and Language, a Complete Structure Within the White Coffin of Paper. If you shake it and listen, it will move, rattle like bones on the page. And so we've been talking about the page and what it means. And so I'll be talking about that with Orlando's work also. Next slide, please. Okay, so some definitions that I like to think about when approaching something. So thinking about empowerment, to empower is to give someone the authority or power to do something or to make someone stronger and more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights. So just approaching Orlando White's work through this. And so this is the first poem. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it before I read it. So Orlando White is a poet from the Diné Nation and is one of great distinction. He has 3 books of poetry. He's taught and trained by Arthur Z. at the Institute of American Indian Arts and went on to study under C.D. Wright and Forrest Gander at Brown University. Some of White's other poetic influences include the minimalist poet Aram Sarayan and the concrete poet B.P. Nickel. His minimalist conceptual style defies expectations of what Native American poetry should look like or sound like. And by rejecting romanticized or stereotypical depictions, he asserts that Indigenous writers are contemporary, experimental, and intellectually bold. I mean, I don't know if he would say that, but in part, I'm interested in showcasing his work because of my experiences that I've had at past conferences, where often I've kind of heard, hushed conversations after he's read by attendees who are baffled or bewildered by his work. And so as a result, I fear that sometimes his work is sometimes too quickly brushed off. But on the contrary, White is one of my favorite poets because of his poetics. Let's see. If you've ever heard him read, White treats silence not as an absence, but as a place of strength, reflection, and creation. And he also teases that he likes to make people uncomfortable. So I might, when I read, show you a little bit about how he reads. So White empowers this tradition in his work, which often values noise over quiet. And in his reading performances, he gives dignity to introspection and the pauses between words, like caesura or line breaks, showing that power exists in restraint. White's first book of poems, Bone Light, has a heightened awareness of language, though he adamantly does not consider himself to be a language poet. And the book also lives, he writes about how language lives and dies on the page. As I approached the panel, I had some questions that I began with, looking at the title especially. What do our bones, our structures, or our forms illuminate? Bone Light. How does Orlando White's poetry and Bone Light empower? How does going down to the bare bones of language empower Native people or Native poets? And what is it about structure that White is trying to show us? So I have this here in my book. He didn't put the year. I don't remember when he signed it. It's probably been a good 10 or 15 years. But in the inscription, he wrote, "The I and J structure what we see without saying them." And so there's something about seeing and understanding what's on the page versus speaking it out loud. And so just keeping this in mind before I read the poems, right? It's bare bones, always thinking about bare bones. The first poem in Orlando White's Bone Light is this poem here, "To See Letters." And this is probably the most accessible poem in the whole book, and it serves as a key for the entire book and helps us understand how to approach and read the book. So I will read this poem. Well, I don't know if I was going to. No, I'm not going to read this poem. I'll just summarize it. But essentially, he talks about the speaker, but I think it's really him because it says Orson. And that's his middle name, Orlando, Orson White. Well, I'll just read it. We got time, right? I don't want to rush it. Okay. To see letters. Everything I write requires this, alphabet. It was a notion I did not know when I was 6 years old. In kindergarten, I was more interested in the image of a letter on a flashcard. I noticed its shape distinguishing itself from its background. Then, with my eyes, I tore the O in half. In that moment, I felt language separate from its form. I recall my mother playing a word puzzle. She'd circle a line of letters amongst many other letters scattered on the page. She treated each word carefully, never touching the pen to letters. Then she would give me the pen. I would circle random letters. She'd smile and give me a hug. My mother once told me that my stepdad found a picture of my real father. He ripped it up. To this day, I still do not know who my father is. I always called my stepdad David, and he called me by my middle name, Orson. To him, it was better than looking at me and calling me son. I am still ashamed of my middle name. He tried to teach me how to spell. I showed him homework from my first grade class. It was a list of words assigned for me to spell. He looked at me as he was sharpening a pencil with his knife. I remember the way he forced my hand to write, how the pencil stabbed each letter, the lead smearing. I imagined each word bruising as I stared at them. The words reminded me of the word puzzle. But without images, it all meant nothing. He said, "Spell it out, spell them out." I could not. Then sound them out first. I recall a day, like many other days in grammar school, when an older boy made fun of me because I could not speak proper English. I always mispronounced words, and I would wonder how to spell them. I still could not move the pencil in my hand. I saw the letters lined up on paper, but I wanted to circle them. He shouted out, "Spell them, you little effer. I'm going to hit you if you don't." I remember the shape of his fist. No one was around, not even my mother. It was as close to intimacy as I got with my stepdad. I did not say anything to anyone. He bought me toys as an act of contrition. I forgave him. When David hit me in the head, I saw stars in the shape of the alphabet. Years later, my fascination for letters resulted in poems.
Wow.
And so, with his poetry, White reimagines the alphabet, punctuation, and word forms to show that Native people can transform not only the colonizer's language, but his own language into his own world, something original and perhaps sovereign. He personifies language, giving language narratives, transforming them through anthropomorphizing each letter and giving them body parts and life, then death almost immediately. Essentially, White's voice is empowered through his world building. His work is empowering because it reclaims linguistic space. He proves that Indigenous creativity thrives even with imposed systems. He writes, "The alphabet is a set of bones we can rearrange." Think about DG's, I am a hollow bone, right? And so can we go to the next slide, please? So I have here a couple of poems for you to just kind of take a look at. The I and J, yes, IJ. And he creates these poems where language starts to create a relationship, where they start to be intimate with one another. And next slide, please. Okay, right. So we have lowercase I and J. He dresses them, right? Man with one leg, no arms, wears black suit, white necktie, woman in black dress, white scarf, no arms too, right? So he's describing the I and the J, the lowercase I and the J here. On white sheet, both attend paper funeral, tears ink, but you can put a hyphen between them. Look, they are holding hands, right? And then the one before, right? Like that, I and J are kissing when you put a hyphen between them, the title. So we have, those were just some examples of his world building. He's circling back to the opening poem. White has created a world through bringing letters to life and quickly to death once added to the page. And so I'm going to finish with his last poem of the book. It's called Writ. And his thoughts, you'll see from this, is that, the page is a coffin. And so once the language is put on the page, it's being born, right? But it's also dying at the same time. So, Writ. A man in a black suit with a 0 for a head follows me. He carries a gun shaped like language, wants me written and dead on the page. He can smell my bleach-stained letters and can taste what I have written, the inked bones of words. But he cannot hear me breathe. Silence is my refuge. I see the white door of paper. I open it and enter. I was there forever, it seems, thinking of the origin and the end of poesis. I thought I had lost him somewhere between the point and the line of language, but he finds me, unwritten in the depths of the page. He lifts the barrel of his pen, center on my forehead, pulls the trigger through hair, skin, bone. I feel the weight of ink enter my forehead. The darkness takes up the white pages of my skull. I let him fill me with words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tacey. Okay, Lou?
I'm just going to read one quite short poem, and it's the first poem in this collection, From the Belly of My Beauty by Esther Boleyn, and it doesn't have a title. It's sort of the precursor to the whole first section of the book. I was saying I wish I could just read the whole book or kind of just transmit it to everybody simultaneously, but I think that the first poem of this first section communicates a lot of what the book is undertaking. The beckon for liberation itches on my back. I scratch desert-dried arroyos littered with fading Budweiser cans and roadside crosses dangling plastic flowers. I stumble from the grotesque reflection recycled. I stumble with my commode-filled body running a Wheaties race. I stumble at my shadow raised by Los Angeles skyscrapers. My expression is a liberation functioning as a contrived reality boxed onto Indian, identifying the branches of soul wounds into another contrived reality called American, aka United States. Empower until we salt our tongues, bridging calloused shoulders, a great wall of burnt flesh. Ideographs, tongue swollen from word arrows, our stories etched on our backs. Reading our backs does not start the healing process. To be cleansed with winds from Canyon de Chelly, luster of precious stones, hundreds of years smooth.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. So we'll talk more about what you're responding to, unless you want to do that now. Okay. Well, so I'm going to share one, maybe two poems of my own. And here the subject of this conversation is reclamation, empowerment, and repair. And I feel like as an executive director of a literary organization, that's a responsibility that I want to hold. And so I hope to talk about that too in this space, but I'm going to start by talking about it from the space of a poet, because I am a poet as well. And this is, and because DG, I was inspired by a conversation I had with DG earlier. This first poem is going to be sort of kind of exposing the system of disconnection. So my story is that I'm a foster child. I was a foster child as a young person. I was adopted with one of my biological siblings into a family that was not Indigenous. And I've reconnected with my Indigenous family as an adult. But this is a poem about that original disconnection, and there was family violence in that story, and so and because what this poem does is this has taken a caseworker's report that I found. So it's sort of archival poetics. It's a sort of a family artifact, but the caseworker report, which is an assessment of the children's well-being and also of our mother's ability to take care of us. And it was used as justification for forcing her to surrender her parental rights. So it's a very problematic document. And so part of my goal in doing this is to both use an erasure of that document, but also to write into it and sort of reclaim the document and tell a more complicated story, and hopefully reveal some of the some of the forces at play in it. So this is a poem. And so, content warning, it's a little challenging poem. And it also includes a lot of quotes from the actual poem. In the text, they're italicized. And so I have to kind of do something like raise my hand to let you know when that's happening. So I'll do that. So I'll raise my hand when I'm reading those quotes. So you'll be able to tell what is the caseworker's language and what is my language. So the poem is called "What Was Said," and the next poem I'll read after that is a poem of that I wrote after reconnecting with my mother. So the mother in this poem is the mother that I will be reading about in a moment. So this is called "What Was Said." The caseworker's report, sent in triplicate, citing the profound physical and emotional needs of these children. Profound amplifying severity, preamble to the damage, to the repercussion, how the little girl quakes, how her body shakes uncontrollably, unable to contain a stillness that will never inhabit her body, its appearances, what it could be and what it could not be. The body's permanent neurological damage, its state of renunciation, of damage to the mind, to the flow of time, its own kind of forgetting. A partial diagnosis, parietal, a cerebral palsy or multiple sclerosis-like affliction. The afflicted being those in need, those who require the hand of the state. Afraid of their families, of their own bodies, how the boy had become fearful of any amount of water, that giver and ender of life, this dream of having his head held down, of somehow breathing that used and tepid bath water, part womb, part hysteria. He'd become hysterical at the mere touch of his arms, legs, or buttocks. Years later, the massage therapist will ask, "Is this scarring from an accident?" And the man will answer, "It happened when I was a child." The child who stared into space, hid behind chairs, who one could easily describe as a vegetable. Conversely, a pile of meat, insensate, unresponsive. It is still his default mode, a body memory of the incredible physical abuse of the past, unable to be held in the mind like his entire being, so meager, so frightened to be noticed, because noticing is recognition, a reckoning, a chain reaction, how he reacted almost violently to kissing or smiling up close with teeth bared. And what does this do to his own smile? That sycophant face he puts on to disguise the stain of judgment, the lost names, lost histories, the brown mother swapped for the white mother. How the report said, fearful of his babysitter who was dark-skinned. How the report said, problems of tolerating abuse to herself by her husband. How the report said, lack of motivation in protecting them from repeated attacks. How the report said, we feel there could be other alternatives. We feel there's some doubt about the maturity of the mother. Now I have to scroll through my manuscript to get to the next poem. Hold on 1 second. Who was it that was saying that English is an exhausting language? Was that you, Chris? Because I feel out of breath after reading that. So you're absolutely correct. This next poem, as I said, was written after reconnecting with my mother, and it's about a gift that she gave me shortly after we reconnected. And in the poem, the "you" is written in the second person, I should just say. So, this poem is a meditation on inheritance and reconnection. It's called Pearl. The raw pearl your mother gave to you, that you gave away. You carry it sometimes in your dreams, its memory swelling like a blister, forged from the blood of the Pacific, little grain, little ache on the tongue. If held in the mouth, it would be smooth, semen-colored, embryonic. If swallowed, it would slide down to the belly and take root there, the way you did once, niggling child listing an amnion, lumped silica, smoothed to a sheen. If you were to hold the mollusk in your hand, place a knife at the base of the hinge. In this way, the shell, misshapen pearl, can be pried open, separated from the meat there. There's a taste of salty mucus, of rusted nails. Can you detect the fecal bloom of the oyster beds, the pearl of shit building in the lower tracts, blushing microbiome of the tides? Can you taste the life draining from the animal, the waters that flowed through, what was sifted and what remained, what chipped at the shell to release its tumorous iridescence? Can you siphon the past into gems, all the residues draining from sewers, dead leviathans clustered with hagfish, bodies of fishermen and sailors, their mother's grief engulfed by the sea? Your own mother returned decades too late to hand you this pearl, uneven thing with its own kind of potential. Her island crusted layer by layer from the sea, magma made igneous, string of pearls draped along the Mariana Trench. Could she look east as a child and see a fire and the nacreous skies over Bikini Atoll? Did she think of a pearl? On whose sons did the fallout rain, whose daughters, pearls growing deep in their bodies? You think of the daughters never born to you, who will never receive this small, insignificant inheritance, a rough pearl and a plastic envelope from a highway gift shop in Hawaii. If you were to break it open and magnify the shards, they would appear structured, highly brittle, mineral platelets stacked like long boxes in a darkened warehouse. Warehouse of forgotten lives, of dead ancestors, lost mothers and children. Little speck, little star, disappearing in the folds of your hand. What does the light do as it arcs along the silken surface? What if all families are grains scattered in the sea? Complicated. Thank you. Yes, I do require applause at all times. So thank you. So yeah, this is a panel about reclamation, but it's also a panel about empowerment and repair. So I'd love to hear what each of you think about those concepts and about what poetry can or cannot do as forces of reclamation, empowerment, and repair.
Yeah, when I think about empowerment and, going back to Orlando White's poetry and the first poem that I shared with you, right, there was this power that, right, the speaker didn't have, right, being abused because of language. And by the end, right, we saw that this writer had so much power that he had built a whole world, right? I don't know that there's much that language can't do. I think that language, the world was created by language.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just also start by speaking to why I chose this poem to begin with. And I mean, part of what I was thinking and what I've been thinking about a lot and kind of returning to poetry as a practice myself is like what can go into a poem And then from there, like what can go into what's understood as a native poem. And I really liked what you said about Orlando's poetry kind of busting out of that. And then even more specifically, like what can go into a Navajo or Dene poem, Esther Berlin being Navajo and myself as well. I guess actually we have a quite a Dene heavy panel going on right here, plus Rob.
Oops.
We'll just have to give you some clans, Rob.
But I was thinking actually, maybe more than reclamation, like just first the act of claiming itself, and that poetry, can be reclamation, but there's also like a claiming that happens with poetry as well. And the first thing that kind of, I don't know, I got caught on in this poem is those fading Budweiser cans, and kind of like claiming that, as something that goes in a poem. I think the poem is quite beautiful, but we don't always think of refuse as like a beautiful thing to notice and write. And to put that there next to the roadside crosses and the plastic flowers, right? Kind of going against maybe expectations of like natural beauty, but claiming it as something that goes into this poem. And it goes along with claiming city space, I think. The whole book addresses the history of relocation and specifically, a family's relocation to Los Angeles. We talked, I think some others have already addressed that history, but for people who maybe aren't as familiar, urban relocation was a program that the United States government started in the early 50s and went until the early 70s, along with the larger policy of termination, which is what it sounds like, right? The U.S. trying to terminate Native tribes as political entities, which also involves, right, terminating them as cultural entities as well, and relocation being one of those methods of removing people from a land, from each other, from language, etc. And I've been trying, and I think this collection and Esther Berlin's poetry overall helps me to kind of reclaim movement and mobility away from those more violent histories of relocation. And so claiming like a place in the city as not always a loss, but also as the possibility for like acts of creation. And I see that in this poem and in the collection itself. And then having to deal with the sort of like ethics of claiming a place in the city that is, previously claimed by other Indigenous people, but also claimed by many communities, and how to kind of find your place in that. And so, I really identify just with this line of like stumbling, that is, I stumble at my shadow raised by Los Angeles skyscrapers. So the kind of like uncertainty there. That's, for me, it's about claiming as much as reclaiming, and that is something you said actually made me think of it too, like in the not knowing so many things about maybe our family histories or our past. It's actually there's definitely mourning there, but it is also a space of creation and claiming for yourself, like who you are.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of pivot back to something you said that I liked. You brought up the images of the beer cans and claiming refuse, right? Like, and in my own work, one of the things I think that really has a direct connection to repair, right? There's something about responsibility and accountability for what we produce, right? And sometimes we do produce those things. And like I said, in my own work, I've written this bestiary of Navajo monsters, and in the emblematic form. And so I'm telling these stories, right, with the purpose of being able to be accountable for the monsters, that we have created as people, as Dene people, right? And it's important. It's an important part, because that reclamation, even of refuse or monsters, things that we don't want or that we fear in society, that goes directly into repair. It's the only way that we're going to be able to heal as a people is claiming those monsters and saying, yes, we created them, and yes, we have to love them and help them and us heal as a people.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, like, because there's so much monstrosity in my book, both from a familial point of view, but also from a personal point of view, and how the monstrous in these systems that, we talked a little bit in the last panel about these systems, that we are products of the systems in some ways, as people, and the monstrosity of that impacting and becoming a monstrous nature in the self. And then I love that you were talking about claiming before reclaiming, because that was such an important part of my poetics as well. And I had to learn an entirely different kind of poetics in order to tell the story. Part of it was casting off kind of received ideas of poetry, like the lyric poem, which is the tradition I come out of, to kind of embrace something a little raw or a little uglier, embrace imperfection potentially, and also just different kinds of storytelling techniques. So there are lyric narrative poems in here, but there are also a series of chimera poems, which I've published out in the world, and they're kind of messy, mishmashed bits of language and image, and they're kind of improvisational, and they're often multiple poems kind of jammed together in a way that kind of emphasizes the ugliness as much as possible, and in a way that weirdly that claiming felt empowering, because for so long I had been afraid of that story, and afraid of showing people that side of me. I think of a lot of like the American like story of like you have to be a certain way or come from a certain place in order to be legitimized, especially in literary spaces or art spaces. So I had a lot of anxiety about that. I wonder what reclamation for your own poetics looks like, since you were talking or claiming for your own poetry. If that impacted how you wrote poetry or how you wrote whatever you're writing. Beyond poetry.
Yeah, in my first collection, Rain Scald, it's for sale out there.
Oh yes, books are for sale.
I meditated a lot on this, a lot on ceremony and the purpose of ceremony and the process of ceremony, and thinking about healing that needed to happen in my life. I think at that point in my life, I had a lot of healing that needed to be done, and that whole book is for me like the first step of ceremony, which is acknowledgement and sort of purging, right? And I think that it's just letting it all out, right? And because you can't have something cleansed, right, unless you kind of let things out, and then the restoration and the balance, right, and the harmony or the hojong that can be restored comes after all of that. And so most of Rain Scald, looking at the land and looking at the things that need to be healed, right? That's like the first step in ceremony, and so that's what Rain Scald is for me in that book.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I'm really at the first stage of ceremony, so much, and like the time scale of repair can actually exceed your own lifetime, because like for my family's experience with relocation is my mom being adopted out. So her mother died when she was quite young, and she was taken from her father and sent to California. So that's kind of our California connection. And I mean, she did eventually return to live with her father in Gallup. And so, I mean, I grew up knowing that more than that we were Dene, more that we were Navajo, and she kind of grew up more knowing just that she was Indian. And so it's been kind of like a process to even coming to understand what being Dene is beyond like the kind of break. And so much of that break still feels very present in the family. It's and a lot of the like healing has not occurred, and I think there's a lot of like shame around that, or there can be. And I think that just we're at the stage of acknowledging And the reason I was looking back to the poem is because it ends with this: to be cleansed with winds from canyon to shea, luster of precious stones, hundreds of years smooth. Like that how long it took to smooth those stones, hundreds of years. And so I tried to not feel too bad about where we're at, that it's going to be this longer, perhaps process. And I think about that politically as well, in terms of the processes of decolonization and how long, we've been fighting those forces, and not to surrender to some scale beyond, and say there's no possibility in the present. I think there is, obviously, and it's something that I'm committed to. But at the same time, I know that it's something that will extend beyond my lifetime, and be this multi-generational act of so many things that have to happen even before repair itself can be undertaken, let alone completed. But it begins, with us. But it to kind of have that deeper understanding of time, I think, is important for understanding repair itself. Because otherwise, when Bonnie was talking about the healing spaces, right? There's this kind of quick fix idea that can take place. And I don't think it's that easy. It's they don't call it a struggle for nothing. It takes quite some time.
It's a generational process sometimes. Your work is you have called speculative. Is that accurate? Would you call that accurate?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
All right, science fiction,
Yeah.
and when I talk about speculative, sometimes I talk about these things I write called speculative scholarship, which are trying to kind of imagine what I would write academically, in the future or to the future. Yeah.
So what is that? You just talked about time as a scale for healing, and long time, deep time as a scale for healing, and when you're writing into that kind of perceived future, what is your goal, or what is your hope for that?
I don't know. I guess sometimes the present can feel like such an impasse, and I'm certainly not trying to think in a strictly linear or teleological way. It is really about pulling the past forward. But I guess it's a way to kind of, also sometimes I write science fiction, so I don't have to it's a way to get around the problems of biography, It's okay, my mom wouldn't be happy if I wrote about this, as if it was the real life. So let me put, this whole fucked up story in outer space. And so it's a bit of a trick there. But for scholarship, it's also how do I kind of get out of the bind of, I don't know, especially with academic writing can feel so strangulating that it's let me get out of that space and just literally go somewhere else. And that's kind of, my form of experimentation too.
Nice. Tacey?
I'm thinking about reclamation, reclaiming narratives, especially, and who comes to mind is, Lucy Tapahanso, right? Layli Long Soldier. And then I was thinking about Zit Khala Shah and even Elise Passion with her new book. But I wanted to share just a little bit about Lucy Tapahanso. She has a book called Sani Dahatkash, and a poem called In 1864, where it's a longer poem. I'll read an excerpt of it, but she's got a speaker who's telling a story about how her aunt is speaking to her. They're on a road trip, or they're driving somewhere, drinking a Coke and eating chips. And so there's this, so often for many of us tribes, we have had our stories told by other people, right? Non-Diné or non-tribal people. And so I think sometimes we take for granted that these, poets like Lucy Tapahanso or, whatever tribe that you come from or people that you come from, that, they're telling our story, right, for the first time. Right. And I think it was Laura Tohi who said, who was saying to, what's the guy he wrote all those books on Navajo? Tony Hillerman, yeah. And she told Tony Hillerman one time, let us write our own stories, you know. And so this, you know, so in 1864, you know, our people, the Diné people, we had our own, I'll call it a mini long walk, or a mini Trail of Tears. It was still a few hundred miles. But so let's see. So yeah, this is the aunt, right? She's telling the story to the daughter, or her niece, I think it was. Let's see if I can find it. Oh my gosh, you guys are gonna kill me. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Okay. There were many who died on the way to Huelde. All the way we told each other, we will be strong as long as we are together. I think that was what kept us alive. We believed in ourselves and the old stories that the holy people had given us. This is why, she would say to us, this is why we are here, because our grandparents prayed and grieved for us. She said, we had such a long distance to cover. Some old people fell behind and they wouldn't let us back to help them. It was the saddest thing to see. My heart hurts so to remember that. 2 women were near the time of the births of their babies, and they had a hard time keeping up with the rest. Some army men pulled them behind a huge rock, and we screamed out loud when we heard the gunshots. The woman didn't make a sound, but we cried out loud for them and their babies. I felt then I would not live through everything. When we crossed the Rio Grande, many people drowned. We didn't know how to swim. There was hardly any water deep enough to swim in at home. Some babies, children, and some of the older men and women were swept away by the river current. We must not forget their screams, and the last we saw of them, hands, a leg, or strands of hair floating. And I'll read that last bit again. There were many who died on the way to Huelde. All the way we told each other, we will be strong as long as we are together.
Wow, Lucy, that's amazing. So I'm thinking about the generational impacts of these forces, and you know, the idea of long time. Is repair possible? You know, and why strive for it in our work?
You know, one time I was out at Acoma, you know, Sky City. It's the big mesa, the housings up there. And the gentleman who was taking us around, he was telling us about how their young people, when they first started going off to college, that they were learning about these stories that had happened, you know, in the 1600s when the Spaniards had come and, you know, were cutting off their ancestors' feet or hands and all of these things, and they didn't know this. These 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who were going to college, and they came home to the elders and they demanded to know. They said, what happened? Tell us what happened. Like, why haven't we been told our own history? Mm. And the elders, you know, they got together and they met and they talked, and then they invited those young people back. And the way that they had explained it was, they said, you know, if you have a cut on your arm and you keep picking at it, if we tell you the grotesque details of what happened, we as a people will never heal. Mm-hmm. And that was so profound to me, because I think that there's a balance that we can reach as people, but as poets and writers, in, you know, what we share and how we share it, how much we share, and, you know, what is our purpose and who is our audience, right? And looking toward healing. And if we're working toward healing for ourselves, right, there's things that we don't have to say. But I think that it's also, right, it's important that in a way that, a history is told. I don't think it's easy. It's not an easy answer. I try to respect elders, it doesn't matter what tribe they come from or what people they come from. And, it's just a thought that I have.
Yeah, I guess I kind of approach this question more from like my position as an educator, as a professor of Native Studies, and not so much as a poet, which is kind of a new thing for me to even talk about being. But because like when I hear repair, I'm kind of more thinking about like reparation and land reparations and sort of this sort of like political process that needs to take place. That to me is often more urgent or necessary than my own kind of like personal journey, or at least like what I want to put emphasis on. Because I don't know, not to like talk trash about academics, but like I think that a lot of people kind of come into the academy and are using it as a way to like, I don't know, deal with their own stuff through teaching Native Studies, or trying to kind of like reach for something there. And as somebody who does have this kind of like fractured past, I don't want to use that position to make myself feel better or talk myself up as like Native. Instead, I'm trying to like teach people about a political history, and use that to motivate them, to have both like understanding but also the capacity for action in their lives, to move forward the project of land reparation. And so that's kind of where I devote my energies, at least in the space that I take up in academia. And I think that a lot of repair isn't possible even without having that land base and that political power, or or it's sort of incomplete unless that basis is there.
Now I'm trying to answer it in my my own question. No. I'm also a panelist, not just a moderator. I don't know the answer to that. For me, as a writer, but I will say that as an administrator, I do think it is a responsibility, to strive for it, and even as an imperfection, the idea of repair, and I have to think that it's possible as an administrator, as a person who's creating space for writers to exist and to be legitimized and to have their stories heard by people who are outside of their own specific worldview. I mean, to me, I feel like that's part of the healing process, and I don't claim, as I have throughout this entire day, resisted the claim of perfection, or resisted the claim of completion, that this is not the entirety of the effort. Just be able to, having some of my favorite writers be in conversation with one another and with me, that's potentially a very beginning of it, but it's not an end. And I feel like it continues. And but yeah, I do have to think of it as a responsibility, and therefore as a possibility, in that sense. As a writer, I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm not writing. My work isn't an intellectual project. It's a body project, and it's a project that comes out of just the urgency of my own mental health, I guess. But it's also, I didn't want to write this book at all. I have an entire other manuscript that I've never tried to get published, but it's entirely lyrical. It's it's a lot more. It's weirder in some ways, but a lot safer in other ways. And I didn't want to write this book at all, but it sort of just kind of kept burbling out these stories and the need to tell them, and it's kind of elemental in a way, that you just need to speak. And maybe that's something about the seer that Michaela was talking about earlier. Like, I don't claim that either. I don't claim that. But as writers, part of what we do is we consolidate, we synthesize experience, and we put it, we offer it to others. And part of that offering is also sharing that responsibility. Like, now you all have responsibility for that story, the story that we've shared with you, and now you are part of the effort of helping with that, the challenge of it. And so part of being seen isn't just, for me, isn't just, part of being seen isn't just to be here and claim this space, but it's also to be in dialogue, and to have shared community and shared recognition, and be stronger together in a sense, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Let it be known for the record that I do believe we can heal. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, healing is a hopeful process, and I think, although reclamation, as you say, is also a political process, and there's a political reality, and politics feels very devoid of hope right now. So how do we maintain hope if we accept that framework, and you can resist the framework if you'd like to in your answer, but how do we maintain hope in what might feel like a hopeless moment?
I don't know. I feel like somebody said this. I don't know who said this. Like, not today, but in the world, that hope is like more of a practice than a feeling, and I think it's a collective practice. So yeah, you certainly don't, or I don't feel like hopeful just like sitting alone. It's kind of like something you have to find.
You're reading the Times.
Yeah, it's something you have to like find and make with people, right? And even just like sitting here with you, I'm like, okay, maybe I can get with healing.
Hope is a movement.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just like it's so basic, and like it's like the thing that people are always just saying, but like you really just do have to like get with people and kind of see what you can make happen together, even if it does feel like the walls are closing in and certain things seem less possible. There's like always a little hole to keep working at.
Yeah. I think for me, I think that hope is inherent. Like, it's part of us. It's there. And it will always be there, I think. But, I'm who am I? Just a poet. Okay. But I wrote all the definitions out just to keep it in mind. And I wrote out for repair. I put to heal, right? I like that idea of healing more than repairing, because repairing is fixing or mending a thing suffering from damage or fault, or of a person or treatment caused a wound, injury, person to become sound or healthy again. And I think that looking at it that way, right, it's 100%. We can, right? And I don't even like the word mend, and that's why I don't like the word repair. It's just because it's like we can have a whole new heart. We can have a whole new, like, the body doesn't just repair itself, it heals itself. And so it's not the same heart, right? It's a different heart. And so anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
I love that we're just resisting the frameworks of this symposium. So we've resisted repair.
I want to say something totally random. I don't know what it means, but like when you're talking about a heart, I was born literally with a hole in my heart. And so when I was like 8 months old, I had to have heart surgery, and they patched it up with a piece of Gore-Tex. So I have like this, kind of cyborg heart.
Amazing.
That's still working. So,
But it's new, right? A cyborg is a new, right? It's a new entity. Yeah.
How do you not write science fiction if you have a cyborg heart? Like, that is just an inevitability, I think.
It's also even more weird because my mom met both my dad and my stepdad at a Gore-Tex plant. So my whole life is like funded by Gore-Tex.
What's a Gore-Tex?
This symposium
plant?
sponsored by Gore-Tex.
It's like the material. It's like this.
It's like a waterproof kind of. It's what your jackets
Probably
might
like
have.
Jackets have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here right now.
Wow. And now I'm thinking of the Samantha Crane video that ended with the coal. Was it the faucet company? Yes. And then the ad. Very interesting day we've had together. I love this conversation. I was also, this conversation was the one that I was both most looking forward to, but also least looking forward to in a way, because I didn't want to think of it as conclusive or as something that we would, it's all done, we've repaired, we've reclaimed, that I do think that telling your story as an individual, with all the complications and all the nuances and messiness of it, and individuation of it is how you resist those kinds of the thieving of story, and the thieving and the claiming of identities. I mean, the identity is not so simple, as to be, it's not a costume to be put on, and stories aren't costumes to be put on necessarily. And by writing those down and claiming those stories, that can resist that kind of theft. But yeah, I keep returning to hope, in a way. So I guess I'm going to ask the audience if they have questions in a moment. But before I do, is there something that you're hopeful for in the next in this moment? And is there something that you feel like you're striving for in terms of hope? Yeah.
I don't know. I'm always pretty hopeful. I feel like, and it's like I said, I feel like it's inherent, but it's also, I don't know if it's a practice, but I think part of it too is like the decision, right, to be hopeful. It's a choice in a way, because it's there. It's that option is there for us, and I do feel hopeful amidst this administration. I do feel hopeful amidst any health issues that me or my family have. I do feel hopeful amidst anything that is happening right now. I know that we'll move forward as a people. I know that the good that we bring about will help. It'll help each other. We'll help each other lift each other, right? And I think that with me and my writing, it's always that movement towards uplifting each other, a movement towards the good, a movement towards healing, individually and as a people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on a really sort of basic personal level, being here today has made me like hopeful that I can keep writing poetry, and I love seeing everybody's books, and I'm like, dang, I want to write a book. So hopeful that I can maybe pull that off sometime. But in a larger sense, just like, I mean, I'm not even just hopeful, like I believe in change, both as like a, the Dene person, but also somebody very attached to the traditions of communism, like that you have to believe that change is possible, like, that it's inevitable, actually. It's really just about how you guide it.
Right. Amazing. So I'll turn to the audience for questions. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists, including myself, I suppose?
Rob, get out of here.
Yeah. Joan?
So true.
What was my question? What am I hopeful for? Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, I'll start by so Joan very adroitly pointed out I did not answer the question of what I'm hopeful for. I'm hopeful for this. I'm hopeful for you. I'm hopeful for being in community. I'm hopeful for spaces like Poets House, which I think are spaces of possibility. I'm hopeful for organizations like INNEPO, Indigenous Nations Poets, who do so much to give possibility to the people who are needing it the most. I think that when you write your story, as I said, you're not just writing it for yourself, other people, so we've heard this so many times in this room, this person made it possible for me to do that, that person, seeing that person do the work showed me that I can do the work. Seeing that story written down showed me that I can write my own story down. And I think that kind of process, which is inherent, in literature, that process of taking somebody's story and holding it, and putting your story down so other people can hold it. It's beautiful, and I think that's extremely hopeful, and it drives the work I do as an administrator. It drives the work I do as a writer as well. It's it's optimistic in some ways, and so often I get a little disappointed in the limitations that we face in that work, which are often material. They're often limitations of time or or resources. But I feel like the process itself is extremely hopeful, if that makes sense. Yeah. Anybody else want to point out answers that I've failed to give or have their own questions? And also would like to invite anybody from the Zoom call to ask questions as well. And apologies if you are frantically asking questions and nobody's letting me know about that. I cannot see the screen, so... They're entirely satisfied by this. I just want to thank you all for so much for being here, being with us throughout this day, which has been a very kind of intense and beautiful day of offerings of wisdom and knowledge and sharing kind of our own point of view, which is again not a monolithic point of view, but it is our point of view, and I just really appreciate all of you being here for it. And thank you to all the writers who have offered that. So thank you to Lou, thank you to Tacey, thank you to all of our panelists that have been here throughout the day. And I think we're going to wrap here, and then we're going to take a break and allow, because we're biological entities, allow all of our poets to eat some food and take a break, and then we'll come back here at 7 p.m. And we're going to hear an amazing reading with Tacey and Lou and Joan and Elise and Nicole, and it's going to be wonderful. And I really do hope you'll return for that. So thank you again, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks.